range of teachers, because I think we believe that many of the tools that we're going to show you can be used more widely in the curriculum. Marcos has already mentioned the CITES Trade Database, which you will see has a large quantity of data and statistics. And even if you don't want to teach about CITES, you could use it on statistics courses and things. So it's all about thinking how we can use these tools more broadly to also get, our messages out to a wider audience. You never know where your students will end up in their jobs in the future. It's also very good to have members of specialist groups, particularly the Species Survival Commission and the World Protected Areas Commission, because many of their members provide a lot of the information that goes into making sustainability findings. So that's very, very helpful. And then, of course, the authorities, the government, people who are here are the ultimate people who make the decisions and provide the advice as to whether trade should go forward. So what I'd like to do, Marcos has, get used to the technology first. Marcos has introduced you to the CITES Virtual College. The write-up in the conference programme tells you that we will talk about a range of different tools, so that's what I want to do, a variety of tools that are related not only to CITES. The first tool that I'm going to talk about has a much broader remit. Then I'll talk a little bit about the tools available to help us make non-detriment findings for CITES. And then after that, Mark, who actually hasn't introduced himself, will go into more detail about how you make the non-detriment finding. So first of all, WCMC is the biodiversity assessment arm for UNEP. We work with a whole range of biodiversity conventions, and particularly we work with conventions to support their national reporting. So I'm going to talk firstly about a new tool that we're developing which will help to facilitate conventions in their reporting requirements. Then moving on to think about CITES and technology, making the non-detriment findings and thinking about the key data sets that some of the specialists have developed and that the CITES parties also have developed. And then finally, I'd like to talk about our vision for the future, where we believe all these tools can come together and where we will need everybody's support, the parties' support, the individual expert support in developing those tools to move forward. So first of all, if we think about convention national reports, why do conventions actually have national reports? Does anyone have an answer? Are there any of you who are involved in helping your government to provide its report to whatever biodiversity convention it is, whether it be CBD, whether it be CITES, whatever? Is anybody involved? Yes. Okay, that's great. Nobody else? But as a general, from the room in general, do you have a sense of, why are governments asked to report to the conventions? Maybe do you want to talk to your neighbour about it for a minute or two? Not a lot of conversation going on. So, could we quickly brainstorm why do you think there are national reports for conventions? Does anyone have? Yes.
I guess it's just to gather the information, especially about biodiversity and environment, since we have it in different places. For example, Ministry of Agriculture. They do some research, some collection, they gather some information. We have another ministry that is called Environment Ministry
anyone have any other thoughts on why we might want to use to gather? Yeah.
Well, based on the fact that nations have commitments to the convention, they have to report about the progress. And also they have to report in terms of link to the other strategies, conventions, and so on, and the new documents that have been in the meantime launched.
Does anyone have any other thoughts? Okay, yeah, I think we've got a whole range, and so the reports enable the parties to gather information together on a regular basis. It enables them to review that information. It could be a whole range. It may be information about the biology, it may be information about the laws pertaining to implementation of that convention. And then, as with all these data gathering exercises, there's not much point doing it if you don't learn from it. And so the key to this national reporting process is to use it to monitor progress. And that brings me down to the next big question. What use is made of national reports? And I think maybe we can leave that as a rhetorical question. I think Marcos is laughing at that one. And I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that a lot of effort goes into collecting this information, and do we always make the best use of it? So I think, I think we're poised to move forward. All the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity have now adopted the Aichi targets. So that provides us with a roadmap to move forward to 2020. And so there is an obvious opportunity for the Convention national reports to help us chart our progress in implementing the individual conventions and in showing how they are helping us to get towards the 2020 targets. Can anybody think of any examples of national reports? What I had in mind putting this together, I was thinking many of the conventions require their parties to report in the period coming up to a meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So for example, we've just been working with CMS, the Convention on Migratory Species. We've also worked with the Daughter Agreement on the Africa-Eurasian Waterbird Agreement, and both those conventions/agreements have recently had major meetings of the parties. And so what they've required their parties to do is to provide national reports in the run-up to those meetings. Those reports are based on a questionnaire format, often with tick boxes, but they also request a certain amount of text and a certain amount of data on the status of species, on the numbers of protected areas, the size of protected areas, that sort of thing. So those are the sorts of information that you would want to capture in annual reports. But then if we think about national reports, if we think about CITES has two different sorts of reports. It has the annual report, which is produced on an annual yearly basis, and for that, the parties are required to report on all the trade transactions that have been carried out during that year. So that is a very statistics-heavy or numbers-heavy report, if you like. So it's all about the number of shipments that went out during that year, the number of specimens that were involved in the shipments, and both the exporting country must report and also the importing country. So each year CITES collects a huge body of data. But CITES also requires its parties to report on a biennial basis. And those reports are more related to the implementation of the Convention. So there are questions about the national legislation. Do you have appropriate national legislation to implement the Convention? And again, I think in the last set of national reports, there are also questions about whether parties had permit fees. So the format for the national reports can also be varied on a cyclical basis, if you like, depending on the sorts of information that the technical committees of advice are required to help monitor the progress of the Convention and to help move it forward. And this is just this is an example of some of the analysis of the AWA national report. So over on the left of the screen, you can see we were able to put together a map showing which parties had reported in blue and which hadn't submitted their reports in time in yellow. And already that's useful information because it's starting to give you some idea of which parties might need further assistance, whether it's in terms of financial resources or human resources or training. Then AWA, as many of the conventions do, have developed a strategic plan with specific indicators so that they can chart their progress towards full implementation of the Convention, and also progress in terms of conserving biodiversity and contributing to sustainable development. And so in the report that we produced, we used the circle format, and we put each target into a circle so that people reading the report could easily see what the Convention was striving to achieve. Then from the answers in the national reports, we were also able to assess how the AWA parties are doing in terms of their implementation of the Convention. And the pie chart to the left shows us the numbers of parties and the proportion of species within each party that are fully protected. So it's a measure of the implementation that those parties have to protect the individual species that are listed on the annexes to the agreement. Then the next thing that we did was, once we'd looked at each individual target, we were then able to produce the text box that you can't read, obviously, from where you are. But I hope that you can see the colour coding, and you can see that there's a green box, a yellow box, and a red box. And the green box shows us which targets have actually been achieved already. The yellow box shows us the targets that are sort of becoming closer to achievement. And the red box shows us areas for much further work. So again, this can be used as a tool to help prioritise where resources are needed with the different parties in terms of achieving the different targets. So as I hope you'll have already started to get the idea, parties have a lot of information to provide. They also have a lot of information to retain from one reporting cycle to the next. They may also have to involve a range of different departments in that reporting. So they may have a unit that deals with protected areas. They may have another unit that's dealing with endangered species. They have the enforcement and the implementation units. So you can already see that putting these reports together is not necessarily an easy process. And so what we have been doing is working particularly with CMS and AWA through a UNEP project funded by the government of Norway to develop online reporting systems. And the aim of the online reporting system is that parties will be able to submit their reports in one place. They will be able to return to that data and use it in subsequent reporting cycles. And ideally, as I'm sure you're aware, many of the parties have asked for synergies and harmonisation across conventions, and the online reporting system would provide the opportunity to share some of the data across conventions. So, for example, AWA has a range of questions about the numbers of protected areas. At the moment, CITES doesn't require information about protected areas, but as we go forwards, we'll see that when you're making your non-detriment finding, one of the questions relates to how much of the population is protected. So if this sort of data, if you know that it's available through your national report to AWA, you know where to find it, then potentially in future that makes your CITES decision making much easier. So the aim of these online reporting systems is to reduce the reporting burden for parties, to enable them to access information reported previously, also to enable them to allow multiple users within a government to contribute to that reporting process. And the whole of that, we hope, will encourage synergies and also enable us all as a global community to manage information more cost effectively. So what I want to do now is just introduce you in a little bit more detail to the online reporting system that has been developed with the CMS family. So it's been prepared particularly for CMS and AWA, but it's also been presented to parties to Ramsar, and Ramsar have taken the decision that they're going to try using it to put together information for their Ramsar site information sheets. They're also thinking about the potential of using it for their own national reporting cycle. So they've just recently had a conference of parties, so it will be another 2 to 3 years before their next COP, and they're considering using online reporting for that reporting process. This might be a bit premature, but we have also talked to Marcus about possibilities for using it with CITES biennial reporting. But we don't yet have a decision on that. And these tools have also been presented to a cross convention group that Marcos chairs called the Informaea Network. And whilst we haven't got endorsement from the full network, a number of the conventions that contribute to that network have also expressed interest. And the illustration down here shows you the front page for the AWA national reports, so that you can see that the tool can be developed according to the needs of each particular convention. It can include species photographs if you happen to be a convention that requires information on the status of individual species. So it is quite flexible and can be developed in a number of different ways. So now, just quickly to think perhaps about the key features of an online reporting system. What I want to do is move through, quickly showing you some screenshots of the current online reporting system. It's a system that can be used by the secretariats to develop questionnaires. And one might ask, if the secretariats are going to develop their own questionnaires, why don't they just use a tool like SurveyMonkey? I'm sure, have any of you used SurveyMonkey? No? That is an online tool. That is an online tool that allows you to put together questionnaires and to analyse the results. And again, for those of you that are wanting to carry out surveys, it's freely available. So, it is a very useful tool. However, having assessed it, it doesn't allow you to delegate different sections of the questionnaire to different parties. And it has a range of other aspects that are not as flexible as this tool that was developed with AWA. So AWA had a series of specific requests that it wanted it wanted to be able to take into account, it wanted the Secretariat to have the flexibility to make changes and things, and so this is why this tool has been developed. It is security protected. For many governments, a certain amount of information must be retained securely, so there is a password protected login. As I've said, it allows you to delegate different sections of the questionnaire to different departments within your country. So there is a delegation dashboard, and the major focal point for the party can then delegate access to other users within their party. Once you have access to the tool, you can then determine which questionnaire you want to fill in. So at the moment, I've got the Ramsar site information